Ahead to our other guests who are joining us this evening. We have Sanjay Jha of the Congress Party, Mr. Narendra Taneja, senior spokesperson of the BJP, national spokesperson of the BJP, joining us this evening. But first, I'm going to say good evening to Dr. Hiranandani, who's the president of ASSOCHAM. He's also with NAREDCO. Mr. Hiranandani, good evening, sir. Let me ask you, do you believe these concerns are genuine? Do you believe that we've got enough measures in place? The government today has announced a massive package to help the poor, the weaker sections of society, to try and address those who are going to immediately feel the economic pinch of this 21-day lockdown and, of course, COVID-19.
Nothing is ever going to be enough, because the situation is so grim at the ground level that they'll mange more, and obviously the thing. But the most important fact is the thing that they have been able to look after the bottom of the pyramid. And I think this is something which is absolutely extraordinary. They have talked about people who are at the farmers level, those who are construction workers, those who are migrants, those who are women, those who are pensioners. I think all the schemes, there is free gas availability for 3 months. There is a question of giving rice or wheat. There is a question of giving nutrition in terms of pulses. I think I think there's a huge statement which is made by the Prime Minister and today the Finance Minister in terms of this direction. So that was the first beginning which I thought was necessary for us to take. The second part of it, obviously, is the grassroots level matter, which you have explained extremely well, and which Mr. Anil Deshmukh has also mentioned over here about the excellent work done by the government machinery and the police force. I think extraordinary. Even the municipal commissioner is actively involved, because we are running a hospital and we know the extent of support that has been given for the purposes of these workers. The contact tracing of each and every person who has been found to have coronavirus, how that has been executed, and the help to be done. But of course there are problems. There are less protection kits, there are less other things which are there, which we are trying to provide. But nobody had any idea of the size of the problem and the extent to which we would be requiring it. But I think the public support has been extremely good. On our construction sites, all the developers have been able to see to it that those people are given full ration, and all ration is available to the construction workers who are still on the sites, and many of them still are there, because except for the first movement, the rest of the construction labor are still on the sites. And I think the benefit of 31,000 crores which was lying in the accounts of the labor with cess which was collected, I'm glad that directions have been issued by the Finance Minister to do this at the state level in order to give this benefit. So I think lot of action, lot of problems, lot of issues, lot of constraints which are happening at the operational level, but I'm sure they will get sorted. But I think the overall support to the system has happened, and I'm thanks to the media that the problems which are coming up are flagged off very quickly, and thanks to the government and the police that they are actually going down and rectifying the problems quickly. Of course, the disease coronavirus is also very fast and rampant, so it's going to be a tough challenge between us and the virus. But I'm sure that we will go the China way in terms of settling this issue, rather than the Italy way, which was really unsuccessful. So I'm glad that we have taken a firm hand. There are a lot of problems on the ground, I agree with you, but I think those are mitigation things are being done.
Well, things are being done, and Dr. Hiranandani, with your permission, I'm going to also bring in Mr. Narendra Taneja and Sanjay Jha. And Mr. Taneja and Sanjay Jha, the collective spirit here on the right stand is to take the right stand in the interest of the country. So the criticism will be constructive, the suggestions will be positive, and the take forward, going forward. Because one thing which Mr. Taneja, which I was also speaking to a medical expert earlier in the day in Milan, and Sanjay Jha and Dr. Hiranandani, is that he was saying that we will have to be ready to be able to spare 50 beds or 50% of a hospital's facility for treating COVID-19 patients going forward. That is the level of preparedness we need to have, and every nation found it challenging. India, by virtue of its size, Mr. Taneja, by virtue of the magnitude and the number of people that we have, will find it challenging. But so far, one thing that I have to say is that the criticism has been constructive, the feedback and the response has been positive, and there has been an immense amount of patience that's been shown by everybody at all quarters. And that is something which shows collaborative effort, Mr. Taneja. But there are serious problems which need to be addressed in the next 72 hours. I know the ICMR called for bids for serological testing, and that bid was online. So they should have decided on the bidder, because the cutoff time was 3 p.m. So hopefully by next week we'll have serological testing in place, which is cheaper, which is faster, perhaps more effective. But Mr. Taneja, the challenges are many. The next question that's been asked is, like I said, Nawab Malik has said, EMIs on loans taken by homes, small businesses, auto rickshaw drivers, those who are looking at public transport, Uber drivers, Uber mechanisms. What is going to happen to all of them? Because this is a straight hit on their livelihood.
Well, as you have seen, Anand, from the Ministry of Finance, I mean, the first and foremost importantly, those people, like about 50 to 60 crore people, I mean, those in the bottom of the pyramid that you said in your report, I mean, they are a top priority in terms of making sure that, they are looked after. But that's not just the beginning of the story, in a way that, every single Indian is very, very precious as far as the government is concerned. And also, you said about the warriors. Today, the good I would like to thank other political parties also today for that. Today, we have got 136 crore warriors in this country. Every single Indian has come out standing behind the Prime Minister. Every single Indian is also a warrior today, fighting, battling with this disease. So I think that's what basically shows the strength. And as far as the other, technical details you talked about, I can just tell you that, in the war room, we are handling it just like a war, and these things are being addressed on real-time basis. At the same time, our experts have studied Italy, Germany, South Korea, Singapore, Japan, China, those cases, how they have handled this thing has been studied thoroughly, and we are picking up the best practices from there, and the best moves from all these countries, and also from some other parts of the world. That's being done on practically a real-time basis. Because as we have seen that within this very short period of time, the kind of amount of work and the steps which have been already taken. This is a proactive government when it comes to them, as Prime Minister has made it repeatedly clear. We are here to protect life of every single Indian. Every life is very precious. We have seen those visuals of people who started walking out of desperation, or probably they were not well informed and all that. Every single group of that person is being addressed. State governments have taken their own initiative. We have taken our own initiative. And this is, as I said, as we progress, our agenda is very clear. Our agenda is together with 137 crore warriors, we want to win this war. And I can assure you, if you look at the spirit of the people of this country and the mission of the government, we're going to win this war. We shall win.
Well, there are so many, Sanjay Jha. Ashok Kumar Singh comes to mind. There are, Police Commissioner S.N. Srivastava comes to mind. IGP Jammu Mukesh Singh comes to mind. There are so many people who have not slept in the last fortnight plus, at least in the last 2 months. I'm not even getting into the medical staff and the doctors who are pulling double shifts, triple shifts, and putting their lives at risk, Sanjay. And it is also encouraging to see that the government's moves and the government's announcements today is quite similar to what Mr. Chidambaram had suggested, like the 10-point suggestion that came forward, saying that we need to do something for the lower, weaker sections of society, people who are going to be economically hit. So somewhere there seems to be a collective thinking, because everybody seems to have understood what we are up against. This is a demon, this is a disease that supersedes all.
Yeah, absolutely, Anand. And I think, out here, let me just kind of endorse what Mr. Taneja has said. We are in it together. This is a collective battle. We are up against an absolutely, the most dangerous monster ever imaginable, right? And I think it's devastating the world as we talk. And this is a time for, all what I call as creative energies to be collectively channelized. And, all the suggestions that Mr. Chidambaram gave, including Manrega, PM Kisan, etc., that obviously it's a modest beginning, but better late than never, because one of the biggest fears a lot of us had when we saw, people walking miles to their villages and, to a great extent becoming a humanitarian crisis. One of the areas that all state governments and the central government need to work on, because these images that you're finding on social media, where the police, with all their good intentions, perhaps have gone overboard and been terribly insensitive and, hitting delivery boys or those who are really at the fringe and trying to make the two ends meet. That has actually created a lot of, unfortunately, a negative environment, and I'm sure that will come under control. But the big challenge, and I think this is where all of us, the central government and the state governments, need to work together, is Anand, in flattening the curve. One of the things that why the numbers thankfully haven't escalated or ballooned beyond proportions, and let's keep our fingers crossed and be optimistic. But the fact is that we need time to build the medical and the public health infrastructure in the event that the cases were to kind of suddenly alarmingly rise. And I think that's the reason why this is the period of social distancing and, people only stepping out if they have to. Let me give you an example, though. I mean,
Sanjay, with your permission, please, and with your permission, I've just got an update of what Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said at the G20 summit, and we'll try and go across to that right away to bring this into context and perspective, because the G20, it was a virtual summit that was called for, and let's just go across to this straight away. We're ready with the details, and we've been able to access the details. Thousands, and I'm going to read what the Prime Minister has said at the G20 summit, representing India and the nations, and talking to the other nations. Thousands of precious lives have been lost to this crisis. Equally alarming are its social and economic costs. However, beyond our immediate trauma, I would like to focus upon a fundamental reality which this pandemic has exposed. Zaka Jacob joins us with more details. Yes, Zaka.
So this is what the Prime Minister has said in this meeting at the G20. Remember, the Prime Minister had pushed for this meeting. He had told this to Scott Morrison, the Australian Prime Minister. He had called up Mohammed bin Salman. This is what the Prime Minister had said, that thousands of precious lives have already been lost to this crisis. The social and economic costs are equally alarming. But beyond the immediate trauma, what the Prime Minister focused on was that this pandemic has really exposed the lack of cohesion at the highest level. He's also said that the G20 has emerged as the leading forum to try and mitigate any global crisis, right from the 2008 global financial meltdown that we saw. So the G20 had become the premier fora, and we have cooperated more to balance competing individual interests rather than advance the collective interests of all humankind. He's also said that multilateral fora have become less effective in promoting what he called the shared interests of humanity, whether it's in terrorism or climate change. And now he's alluded to how COVID has also become yet another example of how the world has failed to come together at this critical time and evolve a global response. Right now, Anand, what we're seeing is a response at the level of individual countries, and that too when things have gotten really bad. We've seen that with China, we've seen that with Italy, and India. Now we have a 21-day lockdown, thankfully, of course, before things have gotten too hard to manage. I think the Prime Minister has really shown a mirror to the G20, as it were, as to how the G20 has failed this time to come together. And it's primarily because the two biggest countries in the world right now, the US and China, are dealing with their own issues, whether it's on the trade war between the both of them, and of course the rapid spread of this disease within their borders, and also they have their own little politics and domestic constituencies to take care of. This is something that we did not see in 2008 when the financial crisis happened. That time it was Obama and it was Hu Jintao in China. They really came together to stem and plug the financial system from really cracking up. The world hasn't seen that kind of a multilateral effort this time around, and I think Prime Minister Modi, in his comments today at the G20 virtual conference, remember this is the first time ever in the history of the G20 that they've had a video conference, and it has happened at the prodding, if I may use that phrase, the prodding of the Prime Minister. He's spoken to Mohammed bin Salman, who is the chair of the G20, the Saudi Crown Prince. He's also spoken to other leaders of the G20 countries to make this conference happen. And I think he's used the opportunity to really tell the most powerful men and women in the world that they're really not doing a good enough job, or they're not doing a job that they really should be doing as is expected from their respective people. And he has shown how the COVID COVID-19 experience around the globe has really sort of punched holes in the efficiency, in sort of dependability that people have come to expect from their respective governments, particularly in countries in Europe, for example, Italy. There are glaring examples of how they could have done much better. Even in Wuhan, it's only after the Chinese state and authorities got a grip of the extent of the problem that they did sort of move in. So these are the comments from the Prime Minister at the G20.
Right. Well, I'm just going to take, Zaka, thanks for that. I'm just going to take 1 minute before we move on here on the right stand with Dr. Hiranandani and ask him this. Do you believe that there needs to be a recalibration globally? Because what the Prime Minister has said is we have another example. The crisis is robbing us of our most precious resource, our lives, our health. Multilateral fora have been less effective in promoting shared interests of humanity, whether it's combating terrorism or climate change. And he says the G20 accounts for 80% of the world's GDP, 60% of the world's population. At the same time, we have 90% of global COVID-19 cases and 88% of the deaths caused by it. Our economies may be strong, but clearly our systems are fragile. Quick comment, sir, before we move on here.
I think you're absolutely hit the nail on the head. Individual countries have been doing their own thoughts and processes, but the cooperation from the world has not taken place. In fact, it's quite strange that individual countries had to close the barriers separately and did not have to cooperate with each other, even to stop flights coming from each other's countries. I think all this could have been coordinated in a much better manner, and I think the cooperation at that end in terms of contribution for really getting after this disease on a global level has not really taken place. Maybe it took everybody by surprise. That is a possibility. But now that we know what it is, I think a much bigger global cooperation, G20 and the rest of the world, United Nations, should actually close down all the other operations for the present and focus all their efforts into this direction, whether it's a G20, whether it is ASEAN issues. I think all this needed to have been done. I think our Prime Minister has really been able to take off very strong moves very quickly. We could have said that they are a couple of days behind schedule, but once having taken the decision, I think the clampdown has been very, very, very fast and quick. And of course, the cooperation of the people and the people who are participating, the doctors, the police, the people who are online, I think fantastic. It's unbelievable. I'm talking about the municipal corporation and the airport work done in Mumbai airport. I've had personal experience of people who have gone through this, and it's really been fantastic. It's unbelievably, we can really say salute to all of them.
Well, it's 8:30 on the clock, sir. I'm over time here. Dr. Hiranandani, Sanjay Jha, Narendra Taneja, we'll take this conversation. Yeah, big salute to all of them. I agree with you, sir. Salute to our Corona warriors. We had a conversation earlier in the day with the MOS PMO, Dr. Jitendra Singh, who's also an endocrinologist. He's an MD medicine and he's practiced medicine for the longest time. For 30 years, 3 decades, he also